In this video, we delve into 5 harrowing real-life accounts of tourist kidnappings in Africa. These gripping stories reveal the chilling dangers travelers have encountered. Join us as we explore each case, detailing the events, locations, and aftermath. Prepare yourself for a deep dive into these unsettling incidents that will leave you both informed and astonished. On December 18, 2009, Sergio Cicala, a 65-year-old retired man from Sicily, Italy, and his wife, Filomena Kabore, a 39-year-old woman from Burkina Faso, were traveling through southeastern Mauritania. They were going to Burkina Faso to visit Filomena's 12-year-old son. Their trip took a horrifying turn when their minibus was found abandoned near the eastern town of Kobeni, close to the Mali border. The vehicle was filled with bullet holes, indicating a violent kidnapping. Mauritanian security forces suspected an armed group had taken the couple. Their fears were confirmed when Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, or Aqim, a terrorist group operating in the region, claimed responsibility for the kidnapping. Aqim, known for targeting foreigners for ransom, had previously abducted 3 Spanish aid workers and a French national similarly. The Italian Foreign Ministry quickly took action, using all political and diplomatic channels to secure the couple's release. Sergio's daughter, Alexia, made an emotional appeal on Italian television, urging the Italian government to contact the kidnappers. She had been waiting to hear from her father since December 16th and was desperate for news. While held captive, Sergio and Filomena endured months of uncertainty and fear. In February 2010, AQIM released a photograph of the couple. The picture showed Sergio, grey-haired and kneeling on a rug in the desert, beside a woman identified as Filomena, her face obscured. Along with the photo, AQIM demanded that the Malian government release imprisoned militants before March 1st in exchange for the couple's freedom. As the deadline approached, AQIM posted an audio message on the internet. In it, Sergio begged the Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, to intervene. He pleaded for help, knowing that their lives depended on the negotiations. Italy's Foreign Minister, Franco Frattini, announced that the Italian government was working tirelessly to resolve the situation. He explained that the couple's release required complex political and diplomatic negotiations. Mauritanian and Malian security forces were put on high alert, fearing that the hostages might be smuggled across borders. Finally, on April 16, 2010, Sergio and Filomena were released after nearly 4 months in captivity. Local officials in Mali reported that an army patrol had found the couple in the eastern Gao region. They were immediately taken to a safe place under the protection of Malian authorities. Their release resulted from intense diplomatic efforts and negotiations between AQIM and the Italian government. Foreign Minister Frattini praised the successful outcome, attributing it to the dedication and hard work of the diplomatic teams involved. He emphasized that the process had been long and complicated, but ultimately, the couple's safety had been secured. Sergio and Filomena's kidnapping was part of a broader pattern of abductions in the Sahara region. AQIM had become increasingly active, targeting foreigners for ransom. This incident highlighted the dangers that travelers face in areas where terrorist groups operate. It also underscored the importance of international cooperation in addressing such threats. On April 4, 2022, in Yalgo, Burkina Faso, 83-year-old Sister Sue Ellen Tennyson, a missionary nun from Louisiana, was kidnapped. She had lived in the area for 8 years, helping starving and malnourished children. Her peaceful life was suddenly disrupted when at least 10 armed men broke into the convent where she lived with 2 other Maronite nuns. They destroyed the facility, shooting holes in a new truck and attempting to set it on fire. They took Sue Ellen from her bed without her glasses, shoes, phone, or medicine. The men blindfolded and gagged Sue Ellen, then forced her onto the back of a motorcycle. They traveled through rough terrain throughout the night, eventually handing her over to another group. This second group treated her better, providing food and water, but she remained their prisoner. News of Sue Ellen's kidnapping spread quickly. New Orleans Archbishop Gregory Amond expressed shock and sadness, urging prayers for her safe return. Sue Ellen's fellow Maronite nuns in the United States were devastated and began working with the FBI and other federal agencies to locate her. Weeks turned into months, with no word on Sue Ellen's whereabouts. The Maronite nuns posted updates on Facebook, asking for prayers and support. They remained hopeful despite the dangers in Burkina Faso, where militant groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda operate. For nearly 5 months, Sue Ellen endured harsh conditions. She slept on the ground or the floor, contracted malaria, and lost 20 pounds. Her captors fed her sardines, rice, spaghetti, and coffee. Despite the hardships, Sue Ellen kept her faith, praying daily and marking the days on paper with a red pen. On August 29, 2022, Sue Ellen's situation changed. She was handed over to a new group of men. At first, she feared they were more captors. However, one of the men informed her that she was free. Sue Ellen, in disbelief, struggled to comprehend the sudden change in her circumstances and questioned their identities. The men were from the US military. They had come to rescue her. Sue Ellen was taken to a secure location in Niger's capital, Niamey, about 200 miles east of Yalgo. There, US Embassy and Air Force personnel ensured she received medical attention and began bringing her back to the United States. Sister Anne Lacour, the US congregational leader for the Marianites of the Holy Cross, spoke to Sue Ellen after her release. Lacour observed that Sue Ellen was worn out. She reassured Sue Ellen of the love and support from many people and emphasized that she had nothing to worry about. Lacour conveyed to Sue Ellen that being alive and safe was all that mattered. Sue Ellen arrived in Louisiana on August 31, 2022, and was taken to a safe place within the Archdiocese of New Orleans. She began the long process of recovering from her ordeal. In her first public comments, Sue Ellen expressed her deep gratitude, stating that she was deeply humbled by the support she received. She conveyed her heartfelt thanks, emphasizing that her heart was filled with gratitude. The details of Sue Ellen's release remain largely unknown. She signed a privacy agreement with the FBI, preventing federal officials from sharing specifics. What is known is that no ransom was paid. The US military and other federal agencies worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure her safety. Sue Ellen's kidnapping and eventual release show the dangers faced by missionaries in volatile regions. Many, like Sue Ellen, feel a profound duty to help those in need despite the risks. Before her abduction, Sue Ellen taught and was a principal at several Louisiana Catholic schools. She later became the Superior General for the Worldwide Maronite Order, but it was in Burkina Faso that she found her true calling. In 2014, Bishop Thomas Kabora invited Maronite nuns to establish a parish and help run the newly built Blessed John Paul II Center in Yalgo. Sue Ellen accepted the challenge, dedicating herself to providing aid and comfort to the local community. Over the years, the violence in the area increased, with more attacks against civilians. Despite the danger, Sue Ellen chose to stay, driven by her faith and commitment to her mission. It was January 6, 2022, when Sean Stevens, a successful Canadian CEO, found himself facing a life-threatening situation he never could have imagined. Sean, his 2 teenage children, Trinity and Kai, and his mother, Heather, were on a trip to South Africa. They had just returned from delivering medicine to an orphanage in Eswatini and were heading back to South Africa. What started as a noble mission to help others quickly became a nightmare. Sean, Trinity, Kai, Heather, and Heather's adopted child, Joy, were driving back when they approached the city of Mbombela. It was dusk, and they needed to refuel, so they stopped at a gas station. As they left, a car with flashing blue lights appeared behind them. Sean, thinking it was the police, pulled over. A man approached the car, wearing a vest with the word police on it. He asked Sean for his license and registration. Sean, having had a bad experience with corrupt police in the past, asked the man to prove he was an officer. The man became aggressive, and suddenly more men appeared. One reached into the car, unlocked it, and dragged Sean out. The others grabbed the children. Sean was face to face with a gun. Sean complied with the kidnappers, trying to keep his children safe. They were forced into the car, and the men began to beat Sean with a gun. The family was then driven to a secluded spot near a cliff, where the kidnappers threatened to kill them. Sean told the men they were in the country to help, and offered them all the money he had if they would spare his family. The kidnappers searched Sean's wallet, took his bank cards, and demanded the PIN codes. Understanding the dire consequences of giving incorrect information, Sean provided the correct codes. The kidnappers warned that if the PINs were wrong, they would sexually assault and harm Trinity severely. The family was shoved into the back of a pickup truck with a hard shell cover, and Heather was forced to ride in the front with the kidnappers. They endured the sweltering heat for 3 hours as the truck stopped multiple times. Sean assumed they were stopping at ATMs to withdraw money, which police later confirmed. They were driven from city to city, and the kidnappers drained their accounts. During the ordeal, Sean considered attacking the most aggressive kidnapper. Knowing it might cost him his life, he wanted to save his children, no matter the cost. However, the kidnappers eventually brought the family back to their car and told them to leave. Sean drove to the nearest police station, but the police were unhelpful. He then went to his father Chuck's house, who directed them to another police station. Finally, they returned to the city where they had been kidnapped to report the incident. Sean later learned that the kidnappers were part of a group called the Blue Light Bandits, known for targeting tourists. The next day, despite a concussion, Sean flew his family back to Newmarket, Canada. The physical ordeal was over, but the emotional trauma stayed. Sean's daughter had a meltdown and got into a car accident, and his son struggled to concentrate, causing him to miss an exam. Sean sought therapy for his family and received overwhelming support from the Newmarket community. He lost about $10,000 in cash and belongings, and Heather's orphanage was in financial crisis after the incident. Insurance didn't cover the losses, as it was deemed an act of terrorism. Sean remains thankful for the support he received and believes Newmarket is the best place to live. The experience reaffirmed his mission to help others, especially vulnerable children and entrepreneurs. It was April 2nd, 2019, in Queen Elizabeth National Park, Uganda. Kimberly Sue Endicott, a 56-year-old American tourist, was fulfilling her lifelong dream of seeing gorillas in their natural habitat. Known for her love of travel and adventure, she was excited about this trip. Accompanied by her tour guide, Jean-Paul Mironge-Remezo, she was eager to explore the park. However, her dream quickly turned into a nightmare. At around 5 p.m., as Kimberly and Jean-Paul were on a game drive, their vehicle was ambushed by armed men. The gunmen forced them out of the car and led them away at gunpoint. Meanwhile, an elderly Canadian couple who had been left behind in the vehicle reported the kidnapping to the camp manager. The captors took the van's keys, leaving the couple unharmed, but deeply shaken. The kidnappers used Kimberly's cell phone to demand a ransom of $500,000. The Ugandan police quickly widened the search area to include the districts of Kanungu and Rukungiri, home to around 500,000 people. Ugandan government spokesman Ofwono Opondo and Uganda Wildlife Authority were on high alert, and security forces intensified their efforts to locate Kimberly and Jean-Paul. The captors moved their hostages across the border to the Democratic Republic of Congo, a region known for its instability and history of rebel activity. Despite the dangerous conditions, Ugandan security forces, supported by the FBI, continued their search. Over the next 5 days, 6 military helicopters and several ground troops were deployed. Kimberly's desperate and frightened family pleaded for her safe return. Her cousin, Rich Endicott, expressed frustration with the US government's stance on not paying ransoms. He voiced the family's helplessness by suggesting they should send in the Navy SEALs if the government wouldn't pay. In Uganda, the safari company Wild Frontiers was crucial in negotiating Kimberly and Jean-Paul's release. On April 7th, the kidnappers finally agreed to release them after the safari company allegedly paid the ransom. The negotiation details remained unclear, but it was confirmed that Kimberly and Jean-Paul were freed unharmed. They were taken to a lodge within the park where Wild Frontiers director Paul Goldring greeted them. Jean-Paul, a married father of 2 who had worked for Wild Frontiers since 2007, was visibly relieved. The ordeal had been a harrowing experience for both hostages. The Ugandan government and the Uganda Wildlife Authority were criticized for not ensuring tourists' safety. The park's regulations required that an armed ranger accompany all tours, but this protocol had yet to be addressed. Bashir Hangi, a spokesman for the Uganda Wildlife Authority, emphasized that this was an isolated incident and reassured the public about the safety of Uganda's national parks. Following their release, Kimberly and Jean-Paul were transported to the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Former US President Donald Trump tweeted his relief at the outcome, praising the efforts that led to their safe return. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reiterated the US policy against paying ransoms, highlighting the broader implications of such payments. Kimberly's friends and family were overjoyed to hear of her safe return. Neighbors and colleagues described her as an adventurous and kind-hearted individual. Her friend Pam Lopez noted that Kimberly had always dreamed of this trip. Although shaken by the experience, Kimberly was eager to return home and reunite with her loved ones. In the aftermath, 4 men were arrested in connection with the kidnapping. They were believed to be involved in illegal activities, such as fish trading and ivory smuggling. The Ugandan police conducted extensive searches in the Kanungu district and surrounding areas, leading to the arrests. The suspects were interrogated, and investigations continued to bring all those involved to justice. It was October 1st, 2011, on Manda Island, part of the Lamu archipelago in northern Kenya. Marie de Dieu, a 66-year-old French woman, has lived here part-time since the 1990s. Marie was a former journalist known for her role in the French feminist movement in the 1970s. Despite being paralyzed in her lower body due to a car accident and battling cancer and heart problems, she found comfort on this beautiful island. She lived in a modest thatched home known as a banda with her Kenyan partner, John Lapapa. Marie was a beloved figure among the locals and foreigners in the hospitality industry. She enjoyed the simple, peaceful life on Manda Island, far from the bustling streets of Paris. But on that day in October, her life took a tragic turn. Before dawn broke on October 1st, an armed gang stormed Marie's beach house. The sounds of gunshots and frantic shouts shattered the peacefulness of the surroundings. The gunmen, who arrived by boat, fired several shots before forcing Marie, John, and the house helpers to lie face down on the floor. The attackers were relentless, shouting demands for the foreigners' whereabouts. They ignored Marie's pleas for mercy and forcefully grabbed her, carrying her to a waiting speedboat. In their urgency, they left her wheelchair behind. The alarm was raised quickly. A resort owner dispatched a private plane to track the kidnappers from the air. Despite this, the response from the Kenyan Navy was slow, and the kidnappers managed to escape to Somalia. Kenyan authorities were quick to blame the Somali Islamist group Al-Shabaab for the abduction, though the group denied involvement. The Kenyan government launched a military operation in Somalia to hunt down Al-Shabaab members. The Kenyan troops, facing heavy rains and muddy terrain, advanced into southern Somalia to create a buffer zone along the border. Back in France, the government was informed about Marie's kidnapping. They dispatched intelligence officers to the region to negotiate her release. Marie's condition was dire. She needed medication every 4 hours for her cancer and heart problems. Despite efforts to send her medication through various channels, the kidnappers refused to provide it to her. Marie's health deteriorated rapidly. French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé described the kidnapping as an act of unqualified barbarism, violence, and brutality. Former President Nicolas Sarkozy supported this sentiment, calling the kidnapping incomprehensible. French authorities were desperate to secure her release, but their efforts were in vain. On October 19, 2011, French officials received devastating news. Marie de Dieu had died in captivity. The exact date and circumstances of her death were unknown, but it was clear that her kidnappers had neglected her medical needs, leading to her tragic demise. The French Foreign Ministry expressed profound shock and sadness, condemning the kidnappers for their cruelty and lack of humanity. They demanded the unconditional return of Marie's remains and vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice. The news of Marie's death shocked the international community. François Hollande, the newly elected Socialist Party presidential candidate, expressed his profound sorrow on Twitter. Colette Bell, a French woman who knew Marie, told Paris Match, "Lamu was her paradise. It did her the world of good." The French government reiterated its determination to identify and bring the kidnappers to justice. The Kenyan government also blamed Al-Shabaab, calling the kidnapping and detention of Marie a terror act against Kenya, France, and the entire world.